In the heart of a lush Igbo village named Obioma, lived a beautiful and hard-working woman named Uzoamako. She was known throughout the land for her kindness, resilience, and grace. Uzoamako had reached the age of marriage, but had yet to find a suitor who could win her heart. She prayed earnestly for a good husband, someone strong, caring, and able to provide for her. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and cast a golden glow over the village, Uzoamako encountered a handsome stranger by the river. His name was Ohamadike, and his presence seemed to command the wind itself. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a deep voice that wrapped around her like a protective cloak. They spoke for hours, and Uzoamako was captivated by his charm, wit, and mysterious air. Ohamadike seemed to know things about the world that others didn't. He promised her a life of abundance, peace, and happiness. Without much delay, they were married in a grand ceremony, and soon Uzoamako's life blossomed with joy. They moved to a quiet, remote part of the village where Ohamadike built a beautiful home. Everything seemed perfect. Uzoamako became pregnant, and before long, she gave birth to twin boys, Chike and Obina. The children were strong, healthy, and full of life. But there was something strange about them, something Uzoamako couldn't quite understand. Strange happenings. As the children grew, odd things began to happen in Uzoamako's home. Her husband, Ohamadike, would disappear for days, sometimes weeks, without explanation. He never seemed to eat much, and when he did, it was at odd hours of the night. The villagers began whispering about how Ohamadike only appeared during the twilight hours, never under the midday sun. Even more unsettling was the behavior of her children. Though they were lively and intelligent, they rarely interacted with other village children. They preferred to play deep in the forest, where the ancient spirits of the land were said to reside. They often returned with strange trinkets, things no living person had seen before. Fragments of clay pots, ancient beads, and rusted weapons from wars long past. Uzoamako grew increasingly worried, especially when she overheard her sons whispering in their sleep in a language she didn't recognize. At first, she dismissed these signs, attributing them to the imagination of children, but deep down, fear began to take root in her heart. One fateful day, an elder from a neighboring village, known as Nzobadike, visited Obioma. He was a man of deep wisdom and was renowned for his ability to communicate with the spirits. When Nzobadike laid eyes on Ohamadike, his face grew pale. After observing the family from a distance, he pulled Uzoamako aside and asked her a question that sent chills down her spine. "Uzoamako," he said solemnly, "do you know where your husband is truly from?" Confused, Uzoamako replied, "He is from a distant village. He said his people live beyond the hills, past the great river." Nzobadike shook his head slowly. "No, my child. Your husband is not from any living village. He is from Obodomuo, the land of the dead." Uzoamako's heart sank. She had heard of Obodomuo, a shadowy place where the spirits of those who died in battle resided. It was a realm of unrest, a place where the souls of warriors who were taken too soon wandered endlessly. Ohamadike had been a great warrior who died in the fierce battle that took place many years ago, yet his spirit had found its way back to the land of the living. That night, Uzoamako confronted her husband. She waited until dusk when he returned from one of his mysterious absences. Her voice shook as she asked, "Ohamadike, where do you go when you leave us? Where do you come from?" Ohamadike looked at her with sadness in his eyes, knowing that his secret had been uncovered. "I am not from this world, Uzoamako," he admitted. "I died during the Great War many years ago. I came back to find peace, but instead I found you. I fell in love, and I wanted to live again through you, through our children." Tears filled Uzoamako's eyes as the truth sank in. Her husband, the father of her children, was not a man but a ghost, a spirit from the world of the dead. And her children, what were they? Ohamadike continued. "Our sons, Chike and Obina, carry the blood of both the living and the dead. They are bound to this world, but they will always have a connection to Obodomuo. The final decision. Uzoamako, heartbroken but determined, sought guidance from Nzobadike. Together, they performed a sacred ritual to call upon the ancestors and the gods for help. It was decided that Ohamadike could no longer stay in the land of the living. His presence was disrupting the balance between life and death. However, the children being born of a living mother could stay, but only if they were severed from their father's spiritual ties. The night of the ritual was dark and ominous. The wind howled through the trees, and the village gathered around as Nzobadike chanted ancient incantations. Ohamadike stood at the edge of the forest, watching with sorrow in his eyes. He knew this was the end, but he smiled sadly at Uzoamako. His love, one last time before disappearing into the shadows. The bond between the children and the world of the dead was cut, and from that day forward Chike and Obina grew up like normal children. The strange happenings ceased, and the whispers of the villagers faded. But Uzoamako would never forget the man she had loved, the ghost who had come back from the land of the dead just to be with her. Not everything that appears perfect is as it seems. Love can cross boundaries, even between the living and the dead, but the balance between the two worlds must always be maintained. And so, the story of Uzoamako and Ohamadike became a cautionary tale in the village of Obioma, reminding people that the living and the dead each have their place, and crossing that line can bring both joy and sorrow. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more interesting stories.